Well, moving over to the media, there's a kind of a doctrine, which in fact is taught in journalism schools, that you must be objective, that you mustn't be biased and sentimental. But objectivity has conditions. Objectivity means essentially keeping to what's inside the beltway. So if some issue is being debated between Republicans and Democrats, you're supposed to describe accurately what they're saying. And if you do that, you're being objective. If you bring in considerations that are from outside that narrow spectrum, you're being biased, emotional, sentimental, not meeting the high standards of journalism. So that, of course, imposes restrictions. Pick almost any issue, but take what's perhaps the most crucial issue that we face, the likelihood of environmental catastrophe if we proceed down the current path. Well, there are two views that are presented. One of them is the overwhelming majority of scientists. The second is a few senators and a fringe of questioning scientists, and that's discussed inside the Beltway. So therefore, you can talk about that. Actually, there's another group, a group of scientists much more significant than the dissenters, who think that the IPCC conclusions are much too conservative. For example, the climate group right here at MIT, for example, has been arguing for years that the models they use are understating the reality. Well, they barely figure in the debate. They're almost never mentioned. If you take a look at the evidence that comes out regularly, it tends to support them. So, for example, just a couple of weeks ago, the International Energy Association came out with its emissions, but just data on emissions, and they were worse than the worst case scenario of the IPCC. Same when the U.S. government emissions, national energy analysis was given, same thing. But more than that, there's almost no if you go on, there's unanimity within the Beltway that we must maximize domestic energy production. So tar sands, shale, and so on. On that, there's unanimity. So Obama, it was part of Obama's State of the Union speech. The Republicans say it doesn't even go far enough, we'll do more. But try to take a look at and the media discussion keeps to that. But there's another question. Suppose we get 100 years of energy independence, as is projected by the so-called optimists. I think they're pessimists, actually. But the optimists who take this view, what kind of a world is it going to be in 100 years if there's 100 years of maximizing use of fossil fuels? Well, you just take the projections of the scientific consensus, it'll be a disaster. But that's not discussed. And this is true of the best newspapers. So maybe the most serious and responsible daily in the world that I know, at least, is the London Financial Times. Serious, sober, careful journal. They devoted a full page to a rather euphoric account of how the United States, with new sophisticated techniques of extraction, fracking, and so on, how the U.S. may be entering into a century of energy independence and global hegemony, because it'll be, the new Saudi Arabia. There was some comment in it about the local environmental effects of fracking, destroys water resources and so on, but not a word about what the effect on the environment will be if you maximize fossil fuel use for 100 years. That's outside the spectrum.